It's time. Well, maybe not all at one time. I realize there's a lot I want to cover. I may split this video up into more than one part. We'll see. But, yes, I've been promising this, the great comparison side-by-side testing between the Everything Wing Chun Flagship lightweight and the Murasame swords, Chuan made folded steel butterfly swords. Been working with both of these, well, quite frequently. It's been great exercise and rehab for me for the last few weeks. How do they hold up? Well, in all sorts of different ways. But first, let me just recap the stats, all right? Each one of these Everything Wing Chun swords is made out of D2 steel with a stainless steel guard and a kind of polished G10 set of scales that are pinned in to what they're calling a full tang, even though it's kind of a narrow full tang. Now, folded steel from Chuan with a pretty beefy brass guard. You've also got a wooden grip with a little brass bolster and then cotton wrapping over the top of it. Has a stick tang that I showed the picture for in the review video. It's fairly robust, and then everything is secured with a nut construction. Blade lengths are the same, 12 inches. Profile obviously very different. This one is definitely biased for thrusting and stabbing as it tapers more towards the tip and has a clip point. This one widens out somewhat to the belly, not as much as it could if it was a dedicated chopper. They call this a hybrid model. But yeah, this is definitely more of a chopper as compared to this one with a straight spine. No distal taper. This is just a pretty thin, about 3/32 of an inch thick slab of D2 steel. This one does have distal taper, profile taper, and actually some taper in the blade from front to back. Both have hollow ground edges. Obviously, the geometry on those edges is very different. This one does have that false edge swedge. Weight, 1 pound, 5 ounces, 1 pound, 9 ounces per sword. Point of balance, about, well, 2 3/8 inch versus 2.5 inches. So very close in balance. Grip length, you'll notice, yeah, there is a bit of a difference that makes this one's, well, butt stick out a little bit further. Obviously, the shape of the guards is very different in many ways, and we'll talk about how those function. All right, that out of the way, let's get into it. Before we get the blades out to play, let's take a quick look at what I would consider, well, arguably the more boring component, the scabbards. Now, bonus up front, Murasame came in pretty nice presentation box with a certificate of authenticity. That's something that appeals to you? Yeah. Now, refer back to the, well, more complete reviews I did on each set of these knives, but Everything Wing Chun comes in a pretty beefy wood core, pretty solid wood, leather-covered scabbard. Each sword's in its own hard slot. It's got 2 retention straps, which with use I feel like it's a bit of overkill and does slow me down in terms of not only unsnapping the thing, but then resecuring the swords when I'm done. Now, neither one of these scabbards has any kind of belt loop or frog or anything like that, and on this it almost doesn't make sense because it is such a heavy, bulky thing to try to wear on a belt. I may try some other kind of system or buy one of their special carrying cases down the road, but for now, yeah, this is kind of a chunk to lug around. But, as I mentioned in that review, there's a little bit of rattle in there you can hear. But yeah, the guards don't line up with the top of the scabbard. The scabbard was made for a totally different set of swords. I think it's sort of a one-size-fits-all, at least in terms of blade shape and width and things like that. So that's kind of annoying. But the other thing that really has been consistently kind of getting on my nerves, it doesn't have so much to do with the scabbard, but how they interact with the blades. One blade slides out real smooth. The other one, because it's just barely, not even a 1/16 of an inch wider at the belly, consistently, even with break-in. There's some drag and snag. Sometimes it's worse than that. But yeah, slows me down. Now, Murasame, a thick leather sheath that basically has what looks like a fibrous piece of vinyl separating the blades to protect them from each other. Everything fits in pretty square. It's a little bit of play, but not much. It's kind of soft. Certainly a lot, well, smaller overall and lighter than the other Scabbard. Single strap, so easier to deploy and resecure. And everything slides out nice and smooth. Obviously, yeah, a lot lighter as a whole package, even though these are heavier swords. Putting that whole thing with the Everything Wing Chun together, those feel heavier. So, this may sound a bit contradictory, but I'm going to say this is certainly a higher quality piece. But I like this one better. All right, before we get to the outside cuts, let's do a quick update on how are the edges doing. Now, I did have to do some significant reprofiling, especially from the belly up on this. It was quite blunt here as compared to down here. And, well, it was pretty difficult to do. It took a while on my sanding belts because this is a pretty hard piece of steel. But, where is it at right now? Pretty good for a knife. Now, the Murasame, I haven't had to do much at all to, just barely honed it up, cleaned it up a little bit, and yeah, very nice. Start with a little tip slashing. Now, I did have to do quite a bit of reprofiling on the tip of this sword, and it's really not made for this. But let's see how it does. It's technically a hybrid, which means it should have some tip action. All right. Murasame. Yeah, that was a little unbalanced. All right, edge on, triple wall cardboard. Not trying to get through it, just want to see what it'll do. Same for the Murasame. Interesting. Let's look at thrusting. Archery target. I'm going to go with the grain, the Everything Wing Chun. Not bad. Similar thrust with the Murasame. Oh my. Well, it is designed for it. All right, nothing fancy or abusive, but I tend to use hard bamboo targets, pels like these, just to give me a sense of measure angle, distance, things like that. But something I think you should hear. Murasame first. Yeah, it feels very solid. No problems there. But the Everything Wing Chun. You can hear that. It rings like a bell. All right, I'm sorry. Those are some pretty lame cutting tests, but my first sunny day in forever just finally snuck up on me. I only had a couple of minutes to run out there and get some things done. Didn't have anything, well, better prepared, but you got to see how the blades responded a little bit side by side. And the cardboard I was using was this like really thick double-walled stuff here. So it's pretty sturdy medium, especially when I double it or it's still in box shape. It gives me at least a sense of how swords cut and knives comparatively to each other, both in cutting and tip slashing. Cardboard, also warning, is potentially abrasive to blades. It can chew them up a bit. And I have to say, now I've done some other cutting with these, the D2 steel's held up really well. Now it is a mirrored surface, so it's taken a couple of scratches over time. But the Murasame blades have also held up pretty well, and so far no edge damage. Now I also did a little bit of banging around on just some dry bamboo. Didn't get the arms or anything on it to show you that. Just whacking on that as a vertical pellet I used to basically just give me a sense of distance and angle and line and things like that. But again, hard bamboo can damage something like a fine edge on a blade, or I have actually damaged tips thrusting into it. Both sorts held up very well. But the thing I was trying to get across, which doesn't happen with the Murasame, so much background noise out there, can't hear anything. See if you can hear it. Yeah, rings like a bell. Not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I can definitely feel the vibration in the handle. Nothing's coming loose, nothing looks like it's breaking, but yeah, every time I hit one of these into hard targets, I do take regular breaks, take a look at the tang and make sure it's not giving out. Murasame, well, it's, you know, different kind of musical instrument. Okay, quick summary of the cut and thrust tests that I've done. I expected the Everything Wing Chun to do a lot better than it did compared to this one. Now, they both did impressively well. I'm pleased with both of them, but this one is designed to maximize its cutting potential. I think it has a couple of disadvantages, though. One, it's lighter by 4 ounces than this one. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it definitely gives this one, the Murasame, a lot more authority in the cut. I also think that when I'm going through something like cardboard, especially a wide length of cardboard, material that can basically bind to the surface, the sides of the blade, and grab it as it's passing through, having this wider blade doesn't do this one any favors. I think this one winds up getting more resistance going through the material than this one, even though this one's a thicker blade. So I think when all is said and done, from the tests that I showed you, they're kind of comparable. Now, before I reprofiled the edge on this thing, its cutting was very disappointing. Now, in tip slashing, yeah, this one has the clear advantage. It does have a sharper edge, and that was out of the box. The tip is shaped for it, the weight and the balance, yeah, so it definitely blew this one away. In thrusting, though, this one held its own. Like I said, this one's maximized for thrusting, but thrusting into targets, and you saw me use my archery target, the same one I use for my recurve bows, it was close. This one did better, but this one did not do badly, nor was there any significant kickback with either sword in terms of the guard recoiling into my hand, so they were both comfortable doing that. Same thing with the cuts. But again, I feel like having a wrap on this grip, especially since it was a little hot and sunny out there, made my grip a little bit more positive, so I may wind up wrapping this grip down the road. All right, so I wanted to do just a quick test of the weapon's trapping capabilities in 2 specific surfaces. Now, up front, I need to say I think trapping is very much misunderstood, and people will say trapping isn't really a thing in martial arts, it's not real. I think when you hear the word trapping, you're assuming you're grabbing something and hanging on to it for a period of time, but that's not what it is. It's usually something that only lasts a split second. Can be as part of a parry or some other kind of interception, so yes, it can protect you in the instant of contact, but the idea is it's only supposed to interfere with, control your opponent's arm or weapon for that fraction of a second, kind of like a parry and a bind, to maybe give you an opportunity, an opening, widen an opening to get in and do something effective, and then you get back out again or do something else. So it's not made to last. But the 2 surfaces on the butterfly sword that are commonly used to do that would be the hook and then basically this juncture between the guard and the base of the blade. And as I mentioned with the hook, catching something in here and then twisting and wrenching is what you can do to grab a hold of something and control it, again, just for maybe a split second. Not going to hang on to the thing forever. Or in certain kinds of blocks and parries, being able to catch something in there, and again, just kind of hang on to it a little bit to move it in an advantageous direction. So let's try it with a couple of different things. First of all, something stick-shaped. Well, getting it in here, and there's a whole lot of room in here. Cranking down on it. Well, yeah, it does take a bit of a twist. Now, there are sharpish edges on the back of the blade, but the guard is very rounded, so I'm really not feeling a lot of bite into this, well, stick. Also, as I crank on it, the slickness of the grip, yeah, the thing is definitely twisting in my hands. It's hard to hang on to. Let's try the front. With something this shape, yes, it's going to be, it's really slippery. I don't feel very confident with it. All right, let's look at the Murasame. All right, smaller hook, sharp edges on the hook as well as the back of the blade. So when something like this gets in there, yeah, ooh, nice grab. The cotton wrapped grip also gives me more, well, grippiness when I'm twisting. I'm still feeling some slippage though. It is trying to turn in my grip, but not as bad as the Everything Wing Chun. So, winner. What about the front? Yeah, a bit better, because you definitely have more of a right angle, more of a space in there to potentially get a hold of something and maybe keep it there again for maybe just a blink of an eye while you do something else. Winner. What about something blade shaped? I don't want to do anything destructive, but if I take an old 440 stainless blade that I'm not terribly fond of, let's slip it into the hook on the Everything Wing Chun. Well, wow, I mean, there's a huge amount of twist before I get any kind of a lock on it whatsoever. Also, the thinness of that guard, boy, that makes me nervous. That is so close to my hand. On the other side, a little bit of a bind. I think what it's actually catching on is just the hair thin gap where the blade goes into the guard, but it's not much. The other thing I should point out, I'll cover it again when we talk about parrying, the forks on both of these are not blunt. They're sharp, so if I put a blade straight into this blade, it's going to damage the edge. So I might, going forward, blunt the lower third of the edges. Not sure I'm going to do that yet, we'll see. But let's talk about the Murasame doing the same thing. All right, hook. Yep, definitely a big twist, but more of a grab, right? Little bit more metal between my delicate flesh and sharp blade. That is still a little nerve-wracking. Also, I'm already noticing, I'm trying not to abuse these, but obviously steel into brass, it's going to bite in a little bit more. On the front, yeah, there's definitely a lot more grabbing potential for something like that. So, winner, Murasame. Let's talk about flipping. Now, I did recently do a video on flipping size and butterfly swords, and in that video I did a quick comparison of these two. So recapping that, and of course refer back to the reviews I did on the individual swords. The Everything Wing Chun is definitely maximized in its design for flipping. You've got a nice big hook with nice rounded edges, and the back of the blade is in line with the spine. Everything you need for a flipping oriented sword, and yeah, it does it smoothly and it's comfortable. Feels good. But we also have to talk about weight and balance, because the Murasame sword arguably is not designed to maximize flipping. It's definitely more for trapping. It's got a significantly smaller hook with a fatter guard that has, well, sharp corners, and the back of the blade is not lined up with the back of the grip for, well, flipping. But it is big enough that I can get at least my smallish hands in there to flip it But unexpectedly, weight and balance, something about this, it just makes it quicker and surer. There's something about the Everything Wing Chun where I feel like I have to put a little bit more oomph into it, almost like there's some drag on it. So I don't know if you can see it, just me doing these things side by side, but yeah, that's snappier. So unexpected winner, at least for me, Murasame. All right, let's do a quick blocking pressure test. A light one. Again, I don't want to do anything destructive. Refer also back to the video I did on flipping sai and butterfly swords. One of the concerns was specifically in this posture, its ability to take a hit, depending on how you've positioned it, into the blade and not transfer that into your arm. And I talked about how I've kind of learned to do it so it stays away from, well, ramming this thing directly into sensitive bone, something I learned first with a sai. All right, now, so I don't have a big solid chunk of wood to use, I'm going to take a risk on some dry bamboo. Now, caution. Dry bamboo can damage the keen edge or tip of a blade. How do I know that? Yeah, I've done it before. And again, I'm not going to go super hard, but I just want to kind of get a sense of, okay, doesn't feel too bad at all. Not going to really wail on this thing, but I definitely wanted to get a sense of it, and I feel like I've got some protection here for my hands. What about in the forward position? Inertia hitting against it's not too bad. You'll hear that wonderful D2 steel ring that this thing has. But yeah, it feels like it sits put pretty well, absorbs the impact of something like that. Let's try the Murasame. All right, so first of all, reverse grip. Not bad. D-guard, not bad. Forward grip. It's got a lot of inertia to it. I really feel like I could stop something with these. So, okay, that one's really close. I'm not going to make you watch paint dry, but in terms of handling, they're both very, very nice, at least for the kind of training and techniques and things that I do. They move around each other with me very well. They feel great, and they are really making it appealing to train with both of them. Now, there is a little bit of a difference in a couple of things. One, the longer grips on these, occasionally in certain really tight moves as I'm training, they might bang off against each other, and that can be kind of annoying as compared to the shorter, more compact grips on the Murasame swords. The Murasame swords are heavier. The balance is slightly different, so when they're moving around, they definitely feel a little bit different, a little bit more of a workout, but they feel like they've got more authority in certain ways. And obviously the blade shape you've got to take into account, something that's designed more for thrusting than chopping. It's going to affect my techniques a little bit, and that's certainly going to show up in some of the cutting tests. But the other thing that I found is that having the wrap on the grips as compared to the smooth grips. Well, the smooth grips on the Everything Wing Chun are certainly more comfortable, and we'll talk about how that works also in flipping, but having these cotton grips that absorb sweat and stay grippy, yeah, there's something about these that I really like. So when it comes to training, God, it's close. I slightly like the feel of these just a little better. Okay, if you've been keeping score, it does definitely seem like Mike has a clear preference. But I have to say, I do like them both very much. They certainly handle differently, function differently, and therefore, as I mentioned in a previous video, I feel like they really complement each other in my practice. But as a final note, let me, well, guesstimate potential durability. I have not done anything overly abusive to them, but I've banged them, I've cut some stuff and I've banged them into my pels, which include hard bamboo. I do believe the D2 steel is metallurgically tougher. I have no doubt of that. And yeah, as I mentioned, when I tried to sharpen it, it's pretty tough material. But even though it's full tang, that's a pretty skinny tang. And after I've taken it out and done some chopping and blocking and parrying with it, especially against something hard, made the thing ring like a bell like it does, I am constantly checking that tang and that guard to see if there's any sign of failure. So there is something about the design that makes me a bit nervous. Now, I certainly have reason to be nervous about the design of the Murasame with the threaded construction and the stick tang, but under the same levels of impact, it's held up just fine, and there are certain things I actually appreciate about a threaded construction that I've talked about in my reviews of other swords with threaded construction. But I am being kind of ginger with them. I'm not going to go out and chop wood, put them under that kind of stress test. And as I mentioned, maybe one day I might blunt those forts out a little bit to parry better, so I don't chew up that part of the edge. But again, it's not like we're talking about having something full tang, like maybe a Becker BK9 with a D-guard on it, because Excuse me a minute, I just had a really bad thought. Alfred, let's go shopping!